The great chamber of the Galactic Council was a masterpiece of light, sound, and arrogance. Its vaulted ceiling shimmered with holographic constellations from 100 different homeworlds. In the air hung the soft, melodic hum of translators, converting clicks, whistles, and thoughts into the common galactic tongue. Representatives from the dominant species sat in floating tiers, their forms a study in advanced evolution. Willowy beings with iridescent skin, stout mineral-based life forms, and clusters of connected consciousness that floated in glowing spheres. At the very bottom, on a solid floor of plain gray metal, stood the human. His name was Gene, and he felt the weight of his entire species on his shoulders. He was not old, but the strain of this long journey and the longer diplomatic fight had etched fine lines around his eyes. He wore a simple, dark uniform, its fabric dull compared to the radiant silks and shimmering energy fields that adorned the others. "The proposal is straightforward," Gene said, his voice calm but firm in the vast space. "Humanity seeks a mutual defense pact. We offer our resources, our research, and our commitment to the Council's stability. In return, we ask for the protection and partnership that membership affords." A soft, chiming laughter rippled from the central tier. It came from the Velnath delegate, a being of elegant, elongated limbs and silver-blue skin. His name was not spoken, but his title was known: Orator Kale. He was the Council's most vocal traditionalist. Resources? Kale's voice was like wind chimes, but the tone was cold. "You offer rocks and water, which are plentiful. Research? Your science is a child's scribble compared to our libraries. But let us discuss this commitment. How, precisely, could you commit to a defense when you cannot even arrive to defend?" A hollow display flickered to life above Gene. It showed a simplified map of the local spiral arm. A tiny, blinking dot labeled GCS Jeju was shown making a painfully slow crawl between two stars. A dotted line predicted its path. "Your sole delegate escort vessel, the GCS Jeju, left your frontier world of Terra Nova 47 standard days ago," Kale continued, waving a slender hand. "It has traveled at its greatest velocity, 0.25 light speed. It will not arrive in this system for another 10 days. A journey our most modest courier ship could make in 3 hours." More murmurs, now tinged with genuine amusement, floated down from the tiers. A Gelion, looking like a cluster of crystalline branches, pulsed with light. "Such a pace. Do your crews hibernate? Or do they simply age and die en route?" Gene kept his posture straight. "Our torch drives are reliable and safe. They do not stress the fabric of space. They get us where we need to go." "Slowly," interrupted another delegate, a furry sprin whose words were translated as a gentle purr. "So very, very slowly. Defense is a matter of rapid response, human Gene. A threat emerges here." A star on the map flashed. "And a member world is there." Another star, halfway across the map, flashed. "A skip-drive fleet arrives in moments. Your torch ship would arrive to find only dust and memories. Our technology has other advantages." Gene tried, but the momentum was gone. Orator Kale leaned forward. "Advantages? Let us examine this Jeju. We allowed it to approach as a courtesy. Our scans show its primary weapons are kinetic, solid metal rods propelled by chemical explosives and magnetic coils. We phased out such brutalist tools millennia ago. The shielding is dense physical armor plating. It is not a warship. It is a flying fortress, a relic. It is, forgive me, a joke." The laughter was less gentle now. Jin's cheeks warmed, but he did not look away. He had expected this. He had prepared for it. "The Council's decision is one of prudence," Kale announced, not even bothering to call for a formal vote. The other delegates seemed content to let him speak for them. "Humanity shows promise. Your spirit is commendable, but you are not yet ready for the dangers and responsibilities of this galactic community. Your application for a defense pact is deferred. We will revisit the matter in, say, 50 of your standard years. Perhaps by then you will have developed a proper means of travel." The finality in the air was thicker than the alien perfumes. Jin's request for a full hearing, for a chance to present the tactical simulations from Earth's military advisors, died in his throat. He saw the polite disinterest on every alien face. To them, he and his ship were quaint, primitive, and utterly irrelevant. "We understand the Council's position," Gene said, his voice barely above a whisper, yet it carried. He bowed slightly, a human gesture lost on most of them. "We will await your future reconsideration." As he turned to leave the chamber, the holographic display still hung in the air, now zoomed in on the GCS Jeju. The delegates were using it as a teaching aid for their younger aides, pointing at its bulky silhouette and laughing at the plumes of slow-burning fusion fire that pushed it through the void. "Look at it crawl," Kale said, his chime-like voice carrying clearly. "It is a turtle among hawks. What could it possibly ever do?" Gene walked down the long, polished corridor away from the chamber. He reached a small observation port, a window of thick, clear crystal. He looked out into the star-dusted blackness. Far, far in the distance, a tiny speck reflected the light of the system's sun. It was the Jeju holding position as required, 100,000 kilometers away. To the alien eyes on the station, it was a barely visible dot, a symbol of human slowness. But Gene looked at it and he saw home. He saw Captain Park's steady hand on the command console. He saw Engineer Lee monitoring the massive drive chambers. He saw the solid, unwavering bulk of the ship, built not for show, but for endurance. He allowed himself a small, tight smile. The galaxy saw a turtle. They had forgotten that turtles carry their armor with them, and that they have a very long, very patient memory. He tapped the communication unit on his wrist, opening a secure, tight beam channel to the distant ship. "Captain Park, it's Gene. The petition was denied, as expected. They're sending us the formal delay notice. Stand by for my return shuttle." A deep, calm voice replied after a slight delay, the time it took for the signal to cross the void. "Understood, diplomat. We are standing by. The Jeju is patient." Gene looked once more at the mocking chamber doors behind him, then back at the silent, steadfast speck of metal in the dark. "Yes," he said, mostly to himself. "Yes, it is." The news of the human rejection was a small ripple in the vast pond of galactic affairs. It was a minor amusement, a topic for brief conversation over shimmering drinks. The real business of the Council continued. For the Velnath, that business was now secrecy and panic. In a secure docking bay deep within the Council station, a Velnath scout ship named the Swift Clarion sat silent and dark. Its beautiful, needle-like hull was scarred with deep, jagged grooves that looked less like weapon damage and more like bites taken out of reality itself. The substance of the ship seemed frayed at the edges. Two figures stood before it. One was Commander Tay, his silver-blue skin dull under the emergency lights. His usually graceful posture was rigid with tension. The other was a junior engineer named Mina. She was smaller, her movements quick and precise. She held a data slate that trembled slightly in her hand. "The full log is corrupted," Mina said, her voice hushed. "But the core data is clear." The Swift Clarion was on a deep-range survey near the Rimward Gap. They detected anomalous spacetime readings. Before they could skip away, the readings solidified. On the slate, a grainy video played. It showed the view from the scout ship's cockpit. One moment there was starry blackness. The next, space itself seemed to ripple and fold. From the folds, shapes emerged. They were not ships. They were voids, darker than space, twisting like smoke but moving with terrible purpose. They did not fire beams or projectiles. They simply touched the other ships on the scout screen. Where they touched, the ships came apart, not in explosions, but in silent unraveling, like thread pulled from a cloth. "The Devourers," Tay said, the word tasting like ash. "Theoretical models said they were just myths. Energy parasites from the interdimensional layers." "They are not myths," Mina whispered, pausing the video on a single, horrifying frame. One of the entities was turning, and at its core was a faint, sickly pulse of light. "And they are not just energy parasites. Look at the energy signature tracker on the side of the recording." Tay leaned in. The tracker showed spikes of impossible energy every time a ship in the video activated its skip drive. Each spike was like a brilliant flare on the sensor, and each flare was followed instantly by the attention of the devourers. The entities would swarm toward the flashing energy, drawn to it like moths to a flame, but these moths consumed the flame and the lantern. They feed on the rift energy of our drives, Mina concluded, her large eyes wide with dread. The skip drive doesn't just move us. It screams our location to them. It invites them. Commander Tay straightened up, his face a mask of cold control. This data does not leave this bay. The Swift Clarion is to be stripped and scuttled. His crew are in medical quarantine. They saw nothing but a gravitational anomaly that damaged their ship. Mina stared at him. Commander, the Council must be warned. Every ship in the galaxy, they are all using skip drives. We are all broadcasting. And what would warning them do? Tay hissed, losing his composure for a second. Cause a panic? A galaxy-wide panic? The economies would shatter. The Council would tear itself apart arguing. And it would change nothing. We cannot uninvent the skip drive. Our entire civilization is built on it. But we can develop countermeasures. New technologies, Mina insisted. In what time? Tay shot back, gesturing to the frozen image of the devourer. The Swift Clarion was the farthest ship. It barely escaped. The disturbance is moving. It is coming here, following the brightest trails. We have weeks, maybe days, before the main wave reaches Council space. There is no time. He turned and began punching commands into a wall terminal, sealing the bay. Our only advantage is that we know. The Velnath fleet will be recalled quietly. We will position ourselves at the periphery. When the Devourers arrive, they will be drawn to the largest energy signatures, the core worlds, the big trade hubs. They will be a buffer. Their sacrifices will give us the time we need to flee to the other side of the galaxy and reassess. Mina felt cold. He was writing off billions of lives. He was planning to let the rest of the galaxy burn to save the Velnath. And the humans? The question left her lips before she could stop it. Tay glanced at her, confusion breaking through his grim plan. The humans? What of them? Their ship, the slow one, the Jeju. It doesn't have a skip drive. A slow, derisive snort escaped Tay. Their chemical torch? It is a candle in a hurricane. It is irrelevant. If those creatures even notice its tiny thermal signature, they will swallow it without a thought. No, Engineer Mina. The human ship is already dead. It just does not know it yet. He finished his commands. Now you will assist in the data purge. You will speak of this to no one. This is for the survival of our species. Do you understand? Mina looked from her commander's hardened face to the scarred hull of the Swift Clarion. She looked at the data slate, at the hungry dark shapes frozen on the screen. She thought of the human diplomat, Jean, standing alone in the council chamber. She thought of the slow, steady light of the Jeju, still waiting patiently out in the dark. I understand, Commander, she said, her voice flat, but she did not. She understood the threat. She understood Tay's cowardice. And as she began the routine work of deleting files, a single heretical thought took root in her mind. The skip drive was a beacon. The human drive was not. In a galaxy about to be plunged into a feast of light and noise, the one thing that was quiet and dark might be the only thing that could move unseen. It was a fragile, impossible idea. But it was the only one she had. While Tay planned his race's selfish escape, Mina started a secret file. She began to calculate trajectories, energy outputs, and the probable path of a storm that fed on flashes of light. And at the center of her calculations, she placed a single, slow-moving dot labeled GCS Jeju. Commander Tay's plan was smooth and quiet. Orders went out through Velnath command channels, hidden inside normal traffic. Their ships on the edges of council space began to drift, making small course corrections that would, over days, pull them back and away. They were like children slowly stepping away from a fire they knew was about to explode. The rest of the galaxy was busy. Life on the council station continued its bright, noisy rhythm. Delegate ships arrived and departed in flashes of brilliant light, their skip drives tearing momentary holes in space that snapped shut with a thunderclap of released energy. It was the sound of civilization, of power and speed. No one gave a second thought to the small, slow human shuttle carrying diplomat Jean back to his waiting ship. It was a snail crossing a highway. Jin's shuttle docked with the GCS Jeju with a solid, metallic clang. The sound was different from the soft energy fields of the alien ports. It was a real sound. Jean walked through the airlock and took a deep breath. The air here smelled of recycled oxygen, machine oil, and a faint hint of coffee from the mess hall. It smelled like home. Captain Park met him in the small docking bay. Park was a man of few words and calm eyes. He looked at Jin's tired face and simply nodded. "Welcome back, diplomat." "It was a waste of time, Captain," Jean said, falling into step beside him as they walked the wide, solid corridors of the ship. The Jeju was all heavy metal, exposed conduits, and strong, simple lines. "They see us as a curiosity, a backward step." "We know what we are," Park replied, his voice even. He led them onto the command bridge. It was not a glowing pit of holograms. It was a room of physical screens, manual backup controls, and chairs bolted to the floor. Crew members like Tactical Officer Lee and Pilot Sue worked at their stations with quiet focus. On the main view screen, the Council station shone like a beautiful piece of jewelry against the black velvet of space. "Set course for the Proxima Relay Point," Park said to Sue. "Standard cruise burn. Let's go home." The order was given. The Jeju's massive engines, known as torch drives, ignited. There was no flashy leap, no tearing of space. Instead, a deep, constant rumble vibrated through the ship's frame. On the screen, the station began to move away slowly, as if the Jeju were a great sea vessel pushing off from a dock. It was a movement measured in patience. Back on the station, in her hidden workspace, Engineer Mina watched the Jeju's departure on a sensor screen. Its energy signature was a simple, long, red line on her graph, a low and steady output of heat and radiation. Around it, the screen was filled with the violent, spiking blue flashes of skip drive activations. The human signature was almost invisible, drowned in the noise. It was, she thought, like listening for a single heartbeat in the middle of a thunderstorm. Her own heart was racing. The secret data from the Swift Clarion was now fully analyzed. The results were worse than anyone feared. The Devourer wave was not weeks away. It was days away, and it was following the brightest, most frequent skip drive trails like a path of breadcrumbs. The main trade route led right to the Council's front door. She watched as a luxury yacht from a core world skipped into the system. It appeared in a spectacular burst of light and distorted space, a grand entrance. The sensor screen flared blue, recording the massive energy spike. Mina imagined that same spike echoing out into the dark, a dinner bell ringing. She had to act. Tay's plan was suicide for everyone else, and she realized, with a sick feeling, that it might be suicide for the Velnath too. Running only worked if you could outrun the threat. How do you outrun something that feeds on the very thing that lets you run? Her eyes went back to the steady red line of the Jeju. It was now a full light minute away, moving at its constant, plodding speed. An idea, terrifying and full of holes, formed in her mind. It was not a plan for victory. It was a plan for a single, desperate chance. The Devourers ignored low-energy signatures. Their own scans proved it. The Swift Clarion's lower power systems had been untouched until it tried to skip away. The human ship was nothing but low-energy signature. It was the quietest thing in the noisy galaxy. And its weapons, they were primitive, physical. They did not fire bolts of plasma or beams of coiled energy. They fired solid metal. The Devourers consumed energy. What would they do with 100 tons of tungsten moving at the speed of a meteor? It was a crazy thought. The human ship was slow. By the time it could get anywhere, the battle would be over. It would be alone against a swarm that had killed the galaxy's best. They would never agree. But they were also the only ones who could agree. They were outside the command chain. They were not panicking. They were just leaving. Mina made her decision. She used her engineering codes to access a deep-level, narrowband communication array. It was meant for emergency engineering diagnostics, not for sending messages. Its signal would be very weak, very focused, and almost impossible to detect in the general noise. She typed out a message not to the human diplomat but directly to the ship's command channel. She identified herself only as a friend. She attached the most critical, terrifying seconds of the Swift Clarion's video log. She explained the Devourer's fatal attraction to skip drive energy. Then, she wrote her desperate request. She calculated a location, a point in empty space near where the Devourer wave was predicted to pass. It was a place no one would go because it was nowhere. She asked the Jeju to go there, to wait, to be quiet, and to be ready. She ended the message with 3 lines. They see your slowness as weakness. It is your silence. You are the only ones who can strike without being seen. She entered the Jeju's communication code, took a deep, shaky breath, and pressed send. The message shot out into the dark, a whisper aimed at a single, slow-moving ship. Then, she deleted every trace of her work. All she could do now was wait, and hope the humans were as patient as their ship was slow. The bridge of the Jeju was quiet. The only sounds were the deep, constant hum of the engines and the soft beeps from the sensor stations. The crew went about their duties with calm efficiency. They were used to long, quiet journeys. On the main screen, the stars were fixed points of light. They did not streak or blur. The ship moved through space the old-fashioned way, and it gave the bridge a feeling of steady, predictable peace. That peace was broken by a sharp alert from the communication station. Officer Kim, a young woman with a serious face, frowned at her screen. Captain, we are receiving a tight beam transmission. Point of origin is the council station, but it's not on any official channel. It's on a low-level engineering band. The encryption is strange. It's not asking for a key. It's just there. Captain Park looked up from his own data slate. Put it on my screen, private mode. The text and the attached video file appeared on the small screen by Park's chair. He read the message from a friend. His expression did not change. Then he opened the video. For the next 47 seconds, he watched the silent unraveling of ships by the dark shapes. He saw the energy tracker spike with each skip drive activation. He saw the creatures swarm to the light. When it was done, he sat very still for a moment. Then he turned to Jean, who was reviewing reports at a nearby station. Diplomat, you need to see this. Jean came over and watched. The color drained from his face. This is what they were hiding, he whispered. This is why they delayed us. They knew. Park nodded. He called his senior officers together with a glance. Tactical Officer Lee, Pilot Sue, and Engineer Bay gathered around the captain's chair. Park showed them the message and the key part of the video. The calm on the bridge tightened into something else, a focused alertness. What is your analysis, Tactical? Park asked, his voice low. Lee, a man who spoke as little as the captain, studied the data. If the data is real, our current doctrine is useless. Their proposed tactic, it is a single opportunity. A sniper's shot. We would have one pass, one barrage. If the entities are not vulnerable to kinetic impact, or if they notice us before we fire, we will be destroyed. Engineer Bay, an older woman with grease often under her nails, spoke next. The energy signature part fits. Our torch drive is hot, but it's a candle compared to a skip drive flare. To those things, we might be a piece of cold rock. But going to these coordinates, she pulled up a navigation chart. The point a friend had sent was in deep interstellar space, far from any star or trade lane. It is a long detour. At maximum sustainable burn, it would take us 16 days to get there from our current position. So long? Jean asked, the diplomat in him thinking of timelines and responses. It is a very slow ship, Diplomat. Bay said, not with shame but with simple fact. This is its speed. Pilot Sue studied the proposed location on the star chart. It is a good place for an ambush. Nothing there. No noise. We would be the only thing moving. If we shut down non-essential systems and go dark, we would be very hard to see even for these things. Everyone looked at Captain Park. The decision was his. He looked at the frozen image of a devourer on his screen. He thought of the Council's mocking laughter. He thought of Earth with its new, hopeful colonies, all defenseless against a threat that consumed the advanced. The Jeju was not just a ship. It was a promise. A promise that humanity had a place in this vast, dangerous galaxy. "We will not get a defense pact by running away," Park said finally. "We will not earn our place by hiding while others burn. Even if they mocked us, we have a duty to our species and to life itself. This friend believes we have a chance. It is a small chance, but it is the only one anyone has." He stood up. His voice filled the quiet bridge. "Officer Su, plot a new course for the coordinates we have received. Maximum sustainable burn. Officer Bay, begin planning for a full quiet state. We will shut down everything but life support, passive sensors, and core weapon systems. Officer Lee, I want targeting solutions for a full, staggered broadside of all kinetic batteries. Assume a single, decisive strike." The crew moved. There was no dramatic music, no shouts. There were only nods and the swift tapping of commands. The great ship began a slow, ponderous turn. Its nose aimed away from the path home, pointing toward a blank spot on the map. In his mind, Park calculated. 16 days. The message said the wave was days away. They would be late. They would arrive after the battle was over. They would find either a victorious galaxy or a silent, dead one. It was the one flaw in the plan he could not fix. The Jeju could not go faster. It could only be steady. He opened a ship-wide channel. "This is the captain. We have received critical intelligence. A hostile force is approaching Council space. Our technology may give us a unique advantage. We are altering course to intervene. This will be a long transit. Do your duties. Be ready. Humanity's first shot on the galactic stage will not be a plea for help. It will be a statement. Let's make it count." Across the ship, crew members paused. They looked at each other. Then they went back to work, a new purpose squaring their shoulders. The deep thrum of the engines felt a little stronger, a little more determined. Outside, the Jeju completed its turn. With a silent, unwavering push, the massive vessel began its journey into the deepest dark, a slow arrow aimed at a hidden target. It left the shining lanes of civilization behind, moving into the quiet places where only patience could survive. 16 days. In the galaxy, it was a blink. For a skip-drive ship, it was enough time to cross 1,000 star systems. For the GCS Jeju, it was a long, straight road through an empty ocean. The ship was different now. Captain Park had ordered the quiet state. The constant hum of the engines was still there, a deep vibration in the bones of the ship, but everything else had been turned down. The bright lights in the corridors were dimmed to a soft red glow. The heating was lowered, making the air cool and still. The crew spoke in hushed voices, as if a loud sound might carry through the hull and into the void. They were a shadow moving through a silent room on the bridge. The main view screen showed nothing but blackness and distant, unmoving stars. They were far from any sun. It was the darkest dark any of them had ever seen. Pilot Su watched his instruments, making tiny corrections to their course. His job was one of pure patience. Tactical Officer Lee spent his days in the simulation pod. Over and over, he ran the few seconds of video from the Velnath scout ship. He studied the way the dark shapes moved. He calculated their speed, their reaction time. He programmed the targeting computers with 1,000 different scenarios. His goal was one thing: to fire the Jeju's main batteries not at the creatures themselves, but at the space they were about to occupy. It was like trying to hit a ghost by guessing where it would breathe next. Engineer Bay and her team moved through the lower decks like caretakers of a sleeping giant. They checked the massive kinetic cannons, each one as long as a city block. They inspected the magazines filled with solid tungsten rods, each one polished smooth and heavy with the promise of raw impact. They listened to the torch drives, making sure the steady burn was perfect. A spike in energy output could be a fatal mistake. Diplomat Jean found his role had changed. He was no longer a negotiator. He was a link. He spent hours each day reviewing every piece of data from the Council's public channels, which grew increasingly frantic. At first, there were reports of gravitational anomalies and unexplained sensor ghosts on the rimward frontier. Then colonies stopped answering their calls. Whole systems went silent, not with a cry, but with a quiet click. He shared the news with Captain Park in the dim light of the captain's small office. "It's happening just as the message said," Gene reported, his face tired. "The Velnath have pulled their fleets back to the edges. The core worlds are scrambling their defenses, but they're scrambling them using their skip drives. They're calling everyone to the fight." Park nodded slowly. "They are lighting a bonfire to see by, and they are calling the storm." On the 12th day, the public news feeds from the Council stopped altogether. The last transmission was a broken, official alert. It spoke of a cosmic-level threat and ordered all civilian traffic to halt. Then, static. The silence from the galaxy was louder than any alarm. On the Jeju, the crew felt the weight of it. They were alone in the dark, sailing toward a battle they would likely miss. Some wondered, in private moments, if they were on a fool's mission, going to a coordinate in nowhere, hoping to find a monster, hoping their old weapons could hurt it. Captain Park made a point of walking the decks. He would stop and talk to a crew member checking a pipe, or to a cook preparing the simple meals. He did not give grand speeches. He asked about their work. He listened. His calm was a steady anchor in the quiet tension. On the 15th day, they began to detect the echoes of the storm. It was not with their eyes. It was with their other sensors. Faint, distorted ripples in space itself reached them. Ripples that felt wrong. It was the aftereffect of skip drives being used in panic, and of something else, something that twisted space as it fed. Lee reported it from his tactical station, his voice a whisper in the red-lit bridge. "Long-range passive scanners are detecting major spatial disturbances at the target zone. The scale is immense. It's already happening." They were still a full day away. Park did not change course. He did not order more speed. There was no more speed to give. "Continue as planned," he said. "Complete the quiet state. Weapon systems to standby. We go in silent." The final hours were the longest. The ripples on the sensors grew stronger, like listening to a distant war through a thick wall. The crew went to their battle stations. They strapped into their chairs. They waited. The Jeju sailed on, a silent fortress of metal and resolve. Carried no messages of hope for the galaxy. Carried no pleas for recognition. In its magazines, it carried only simple, physical answers to a complex, terrifying problem. The crew, from Captain Park to the youngest technician, had made their peace with the slowness. It was their armor. It was their stealth. It had brought them across the dark, unseen as they entered the last leg of their journey. The view screen finally began to show something other than stars. At the very edge of the darkness, a faint, sickly glow pulsed. It was not the light of suns or ships. It was a cold, hungry light, and it was surrounded by a swirling, moving darkness that blotted out the stars. They had arrived. The battle was not over. It was a slaughter, and the Jeju, the slow, mocked human warship, had finally reached the door. The view screen showed a nightmare. It was not a clean battle with lines of ships and bright lasers. It was chaos and ruin, where the Council's grand fleet had gathered. There was now a swirling cloud of debris, glittering like broken glass in the faint light of a distant star. At the center of the cloud were the Devourers. They were not solid. They were like living holes in space, darker than the void around them, twisting and turning with a terrible, silent grace. Where their edges passed, pieces of ships simply vanished, eaten away into nothing. And the ships that remained were making everything worse. Every few seconds, a brilliant flash of blue-white light would erupt as a cruiser or fighter tried to skip away to safety. Each flash was like a thunderclap on the Jeju sensors, and each flash drew the Devourers like sharks to blood. They would swarm the light, and the ship would be gone before its jump was complete. It was a feast of light, and the galaxy's finest were the main course. On the bridge of the Jeju, the crew watched in silence. The only sound was the low breath of the life support systems. Jean felt a cold knot in his stomach. He saw the symbols of council races he knew, the elegant Velnath arcships, the sturdy Gelian fortresses, being wiped from existence. All that power, all that speed, meant nothing. Status? Captain Park said, his voice calm in the terrible quiet. All systems at quiet state minimum. Engineer Bay reported from her station. Thermal signature is near background. We are a cold rock. Sensors are passive only, Tactical Officer Lee said. The entities show no awareness of our presence. Their focus is entirely on the active energy signatures. Park nodded. Take us in. Slow and steady. Plot a course through the debris field. Use it for cover. Pilot Seuss' hands moved gently over his controls. The great ship began to glide forward. It did not rush. It moved with the same careful pace it had used for its 16-day journey. Pieces of broken alien ships, some as big as mountains, drifted past the view screen. The Jeju sailed between them, a silent ghost among the tombstones. They were close enough now to see details. They saw the Velnath arcship that had once carried Orator Kale. It was trying to power up its main engines, a last desperate attempt to run. A brilliant glow built at its stern. Before it could flash into a skip, 3 of the dark shapes flowed over it. The beautiful ship seemed to fray at the edges, then collapsed inward into a knot of scrap before silently coming apart. No-one on the Jeju cheered. They just watched. The mockery in the council chamber felt like a lifetime ago. A new signal appeared on the communication panel. It was a desperate, open broadcast. The image was shaky, filled with smoke and flashing emergency lights. It was Commander Tay. His silver-blue skin was marred by a burn across his cheek. His eyes were wide with a fear he could no longer hide. Any ship, this is Velnath Command. The core is breached. The entities are everywhere. Fall back. Skip to the rally point. Skip. The screen showed a dark shape passing through the wall behind him. The transmission dissolved into static.in that moment, on the council station now overrun. Engineer Mina heard the transmission end from her hiding place in a maintenance shaft. She closed her eyes. Her plan, her desperate hope, felt stupid now. What could one slow ship do? It was probably already dead, a speck swallowed by the dark on the Jeju. Park looked at the static on the screen where Tay's face had been. He is still trying to run, Park said. No anger in his voice, just understanding. He does not know how to stop. Then, another signal cut through. It was on the same narrowband channel Mina had used days before. It was weak, breaking up. It was her voice. Jeju, if you are there, the central entity. It is the source. Pulses. Coordinates the others. Target the pulse. A friend. The signal died. Tactical Officer Lee's hands flew over his console. He reran the old video, focusing on the core of one of the larger shapes. There, barely visible, was a faint, rhythmic pulse of that same sickly light. He had thought it was a sensor ghost. Now he knew it was a heart. Captain, Lee said, I have a target, bearing Mark 7. The large entity at the center of the swarm. This pulse is regular. I can time the shot. Park looked at the main screen. To reach that firing position, they would have to move out from the cover of the debris. They would have to sail, slow and exposed, right into the edge of the swirling dark. They would be a single, silent ship crossing an open field of predators. New course, Officer Sue. Bring us to Tactical's firing solution. Nice and easy. The Jeju turned. It left the safety of the broken ships behind. It entered the open space where the devourers swarmed. On the bridge, every crew member held their breath. The dark shapes whirled past, sometimes close enough to see the way they made the stars behind them wink out. But they did not turn. They did not notice. The Jeju was too quiet, too cold, too slow to register as food. It was beneath their notice. They were in position. All kinetic batteries report ready, Lee said, his voice tight. Target lock is stable. Firing solution is programmed. We have one shot before the recoil and muzzle flash changes our signature. Park sat in his command chair. He looked at the pulsing heart of the darkness on the screen. He thought of the galaxy mocking them. He thought of the long, patient journey through the dark. Fire, he said. The word was simple. It was not shouted. It was spoken with the calm of a man stating a fact. Fire. On the Jeju, systems that had been sleeping woke up. Deep in the ship's belly, magnetic coils charged with a low whine. Massive breaches locked shut. For a single second, the silent ship became a hive of focused, violent activity. Then, the ship kicked. It was not the bright, clean flash of energy weapons. It was an old, physical violence. From ports along the Jeju's heavy flank, 24 tungsten rods erupted into the void. Each was as long as a tree and heavier than a freight shuttle. They carried no explosives, no guidance systems. They were just mass and speed, propelled by magnetic force and chemical rage. They shot into the dark, invisible to the eye. Their path was marked only by the faint, fading glow of superheated gas at their launch points. The Jeju shuddered from the recoil, a deep, groaning sound through its frame. For a long moment, nothing happened. The rods flew, silent and straight, across the distance. The devourers continued their dance of consumption, unaware. The central entity pulsed with its sickly light, a slow, steady rhythm. It did not sense the threat. There was no energy signature to sense, only silent, stupid metal. The first rod struck the edge of a smaller devourer that drifted into its path. The result was not an explosion. It was a puncture. The dark shape seemed to flinch, a ripple passing through its form. Where the tungsten spear had hit, a tear appeared. And through that tear, the distant light of stars could be seen again. The entity began to come apart, not by consuming energy, but by unraveling from a physical wound. It was like poking a hole in smoke. But that was not the target. The rest of the rods, timed with perfect precision by Officer Lee's calculations, reached the heart of the swarm. They arrived at the exact moment between the central entity's pulses. They struck the core of its darkness. There was no sound in space, but on the Jeju sensors, and in the minds of every watching being, there was a scream, a silent scream of ruptured reality. The central entity did not explode. It burst. The dark cloud of its body tore open from the inside, ripped apart by 24 unimaginably heavy kinetic strikes. The sickly pulse light flared once, blindingly bright, and then shattered into 1,000 fading fragments. The other devourers, connected to it, suddenly lost their purpose. They writhed, their forms becoming unstable. Without the central pulse to guide them, they began to turn on each other, or simply drifted, dissolving into harmless clouds of dark gas. The battlefield, which had been a chaos of light and death, fell into a strange, slow quiet. The last few council ships, broken and bleeding air, hung in the stillness. Their skip drives were cold. No one dared to turn them on. On the bridge of the Jeju, the crew watched the main screen. The swirling darkness was gone. Only the normal, peaceful blackness of space remained, dotted with stars and the tragic, glittering debris. Captain Park let out a long, slow breath. Status of all entities? Dissipating, Lee reported, his eyes glued to his scanners. No coordinated movement. No hostile signatures remaining. Engineer Bay was already speaking to her teams. Recoil stress on frame is within tolerance. Minor deck buckling in battery rooms. Reparable. Pilot Sue looked at his navigation screen. We are adrift in the engagement zone. Orders, Captain. Park stood up. He walked to the view screen and looked at the devastation, and at the peace that had followed. He saw the few surviving alien ships, their lights flickering weakly. One of them was a Velnath command ship, its hull scarred but its core intact. It was the ship of Commander Tay. Park turned to Jean. Diplomat, open a channel. All frequencies. Visual. Jean, his hands trembling slightly from the aftermath of tension, nodded. He set up the transmission. A light on Park's console glowed green on the screens of every surviving ship in the graveyard. An image appeared. It was the bridge of the Jeju. In the center stood Captain Park, in his simple, functional uniform. Behind him was the solid, unglamorous metal of his ship's bridge. "This is Captain Park of the GCS Jeju Terran Defense Force," he said, his voice even. "The immediate threat appears to be neutralized. We are standing by to render assistance to any vessel in distress. We have medical and engineering teams ready." He paused, looking directly into the camera. The image was being seen by Commander Tay on his broken bridge, by the few Gillian survivors, by the Sprin, by every remaining soul who had seen their galaxy shattered. "We will also be remaining in this sector," Park continued, "to ensure the threat does not return, and to discuss the terms of a permanent mutual defense pact for this region of space. The Jeju will serve as the temporary liaison point. We await your representatives." He gave a small, formal nod. "Park out." The transmission ended. On the Velnath ship, Commander Tay stared at his own screen, now blank. The human's words hung in the air. There was no gloating, no mockery, just a simple statement of fact and an offer. He thought of his panicked retreat, his selfish plan. He looked at the human ship on his scanner. It was moving now, slowly and carefully, heading toward a crippled Gillian freighter to begin rescue operations. It looked exactly as it had before. Slow, solid, and patient. He finally understood. They had not been late. They had been right on time. Their slowness was not a weakness. It was the reason they were still here. It was the reason anyone was still here. He tapped his own communication panel, his voice hoarse. "This is Commander Tay to the GCS Jeju. We accept your offer of assistance, and we will send a representative to discuss terms." "Thank you." On the Jeju, Gene heard the message. He looked at Captain Park. Park simply nodded, then turned to oversee the rescue operations. Outside, the slow human warship moved among the ruins of the galaxy's pride, its engines a soft, steady glow in the dark. It was not a hawk. It was not a turtle. It was an anvil. And the galaxy had just discovered how much it needed one.